Okay, why choose open source technology? Topic of today's talk. My name is Alex Büchner. I'm a director and co-founder of Synergy Learning, and we have been involved with open source technologies for the last 15 years. We've been a Moodle partner from the very beginning. We have been a Totra partner from the very beginning, and Moodle Workplace is the latest product, also an open source system. We have been implementing projects all over Europe for the last 15 years, and hopefully I'm be able to convince you that open source technology has certainly matured, has grown up, and is now an alternative, a viable alternative to commercial, to proprietary software. I want to start with some stereotypes and myths that you hear quite often about open source technologies. Things like, it's not commercial, it doesn't scale, there isn't sufficient support, and so on. So the idea of this talk is really be a bit, hopefully by the end of it, that you are convinced that these are really just stereotypes and myths, and hopefully debunk some of those. Also, if any of those were true, why is it then that in the last 18 months or so, there have been quite significant acquisitions taking place, most of them involving companies that are not really known for open source involvement. Whether it's IBM, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Salesforce, all the really big acquisitions over the last 18 months have involved some of the largest open source projects, most notably IBM acquiring Red Hat for $34 billion. I mean, that's quite a significant transaction that even required approval from the department. Okay. There's been quite a interesting report conducted by Red Hat, and it was looking at the importance of open source technology, of open source enterprises. And you can see from those numbers that almost 70% answered that this is very important or extremely important to them. And again, if you would have asked the same organizations 5 years ago, 10 years ago, those numbers would have been very, very different. And as a follow-up, one of the queries was, what are being seen as the top benefits seen when using open source solutions and technologies, and you can see there is sort of things like total cost of ownership, better security, quality, access to latest innovations, and so on. What I would like to do now is dive a little bit more into detail about those 6 areas and put things into context of learning technologies, LMS solutions, and so on. Okay. The first part, I sort of go from top left to bottom right. The first one is total cost of ownership. One of the key abilities of open source software is that you have the ability to fully customize it, that you have the ability to extend it, to adjust it to the requirements of your individual organization, to your workflows, to your processes. And most commercial or proprietary software, that isn't possible, because you don't have access to the code, you don't have the ability to make changes to the system itself. What that means is that sometimes, or quite often, that you have initially higher cost, one-off cost, when it comes to the customization. Because you have the ability to really align the software, the tools, to exactly your processes. The one that's always known, open source software is always known for, is there is no licensing cost. Yes, that's right, there is no licensing cost, there is no licensing fees, but you still have to obviously invest or put aside a budget for things like custom development, for training your users, for providing support, for hosting, for integration with your existing infrastructure. All those things are still required, and there is obviously a value attached to this. Because you have the ability to customize the system to your individual needs, this also means that usually the training cost is significantly lower, because your staff already know those problems. The ongoing support is lower because the system really fits your requirements and not the other way around. So what happens quite often in projects when you do a one-to-one comparison between the open source option and the commercial option is that in year one, the two are very similar in terms of cost. It's really then when you move on to year 2, year 3, year 4, that the cost in the open source systems is significantly lower. Okay. The second part is latest innovations. Quite often you hear, software is not standardized and so on. It's actually quite the opposite. Open source software is known for adhering to standards much more strictly than quite often commercial systems. So in the case of Moodle-based systems like Totra and so on, you have the X API, you have SCORM, you have IMS, you have open badges. All those open standards, they are obviously all supported. The second part of latest innovations, bit of a buzz at the moment, but you hear a lot about AI, machine learning, big data, and so on. And most proprietary software at the moment uses all those buzzwords as well. But when you look at it actually in more detail, it's very often it's reporting, it's statistics. It's not really what big data is about. Tools like Moodle already have a full machine learning backend built in. So if you want to build any predictive models, any descriptive models, it's all there. Okay? Again, because there is such a huge community behind projects like this that the investment is not being shied, because quite often they start off as a niche project and then they move into the mainstream. In a commercial environment, that quite often isn't possible. And the last part is gamification. That was sort of the buzzword 2 years ago. Again, there is plenty of tools, plenty of plugins, plenty of add-ons that can be used for things like experience points, levels, badges, certifications, and so on. So again, that's just a few examples. I'm going to show more. Group better security and higher quality software. I group those together. There is the cathedral and the bazaar. It's sort of been the Bible of open source software. And there is something called Linus Law. It says, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. What that means is effectively, in a commercial environment, you have a quality assurance department, you have a team, certain people, and they are the ones who quality check software. In an open source environment, once the project has reached a certain momentum, once it has reached a certain size, you have potentially hundreds, if not thousands of people who have the ability to look at that source code, the bazaar, the thousands of people, and so the likelihood of anybody finding an issue is much, much higher. Also, there have been quite interesting studies where projects of similar size and similar complexities been used, and one was implemented using open source technologies, other one was implemented commercial technologies, and something called the defect density. That means the number of problems, the number of issues per 1,000 lines of code, proven to be significantly lower in open source projects once they have reached a certain size. And also the resolution time to resolve, to fix the problem, to provide patches and so on, is much, much quicker in those open environments. Yeah? And lastly, enterprise level support. These are just a couple of examples of quite large-scale projects that have been implemented. Western Union, over 1 million users across the globe. Goethe Institute, they're the German counterpart of the British Council, 400,000 users in over 100 countries. Or organizations like Ryanair, where if they don't have the ability to do their training course instantaneously, they can't fly a certain plane. So in environments like this, you do require enterprise-level support, you do require enterprise-level hosting, you do require enterprise-level SLAs. You cannot, again, there is a partner network both for Moodle and for in this particular case for Totra across the globe, where those services at enterprise level are being provided. Okay, so and the other advantage is because there is such a huge partner network, you're not locked in with a particular supplier. Okay? With a commercial software, they might get acquired, they might decide to move in a different direction. You're tied in with that particular product, with that particular supplier. In the context of an open software, you're not tied in because you can pick the supplier you want to work with. Okay. And lastly, customization. Now there's different parts to this. One is obviously design, the look and feel. I'm going to show you quite a few examples after that slide. Second part is what we call the granularity. At what level does that granularity have to take place? Is it per tenant? Is it per organization? Is it per an audience? Is it even down to the individual? Okay, there is different types of customization that are in place. And what we mentioned early on, the ability to really adjust or customize the system along the processes you already have in place, and obviously the features, the functionality you require. And when projects in open source environment are being scoped out, there's always sort of 3 steps. One is, can it be done with core functionality? Perfect, it's just a matter of configuration. If not, is there already an existing plugin? There is about 1,600 plugins available, which can be utilized, which again is a huge advantage of open source environments, because you have such a vast number of users, you have such a large community that develops and publishes those plugins. Or if that isn't available either, then it's individual custom development. Okay? What I would like to do now is just to show you some examples, and effectively the software underneath is always the same. But you will see now the vast variety of those systems gives you a bit of an idea how much customization can actually be done, and it's not just the look and feel, it's the functionality as well. So picture those tools almost like a big toolbox, and we can pick the different tools that are needed in order to build the system that fits your requirement. Okay? This is a course catalog, what a course catalog could look like. That's a bank in Denmark. That could also be a course catalog, more sort of a Netflixy style. This is what the course content could look like. In this particular case, we have 3 modules. They can sort of expand and collapse, but it could also be a tile-based approach. Same system, just a different approach. Or it could be a timeline that's being used. Okay. So from a user's perspective, I'm being presented with exactly what fits what I'm currently have to do. And obviously the authors, the course, have to make a decision at some stage what type of approach is being used. Another area where there can be huge variety in terms of requirements are dashboards. So this could be a dashboard, this is from Ted Baker, but this could also be a dashboard. Same system, but just very different layout, very different type of functionality that is presented to managers. That's another dashboard being created, that particular case, Coca-Cola Group, or again, this could be a type of dashboard. Okay, so you can see the variety. It's not a type of system where you install it, you turn it on, you do a bit of configuration, and off you go. It is pretty much a matter of what exactly is it we want to do with that software? What exactly are the user stories we have? What exactly are sort of the 80% of actions the typical user have to carry out within 2 or 3 clicks? And based on those requirements, the system can then be built. Again, 2 more examples. One, this could be the mobile environment, or this could be the mobile environment. Same system, very different look and feel. And lastly, more sort of a gamification approach. That's with Huawei. They've basically, for every different product they offer, have a separate course. For each course, you get a number of experience points. Might be able to see this up here. That user is currently at level 6. So it's almost like an arcade-style approach. Not something we would have ever proposed. That was an idea they came up with and said, yes, this can be done. We have the backend, it's all there, we have the tools. And yes, it does require some custom development, but once that is being set up, all the KPIs they had put in place where they measured the success of this platform was really, really good outcome. Okay? And lastly, things like certificate of completion. Down to every level that is required, customization can be carried out. Okay? So coming back to my initial slide of all those stereotypes. So hopefully, just going through them quickly, it's free? No, it's not. There is no licensing cost, but in order to build applications like you have just seen, Obviously, there is a cost involved, but you can spend the annual licensing fee budget on customization, on cost, on content, on training your staff, on wherever you want to spend it. Non-commercial, yes, there are certain open source software tools out there which are not commercial, but the enterprise tools, like the ones you've seen here, they're certainly commercial. As I mentioned, we are in business for 15 years, and we wouldn't be here. A lot of our competitors wouldn't be here. Does not scale. I think we've sort of seen some of those examples. Insecurity, poor quality. Again, there's been numerous studies proving the opposite. Industry standard has no support or warranty. Again, we cover those. Okay, so hopefully that has given you a bit of a flavor that open source tools are not just a niche product anymore. Open source software, open source learning management systems, talent management systems, they have gone mainstream. They have now really become a major competitor. And if you're interested more, we are just in the stand just behind you, so feel free to come along. Unless there is any questions now, I'm more than happy to answer. Okay. Well, thank you, and